Thank you, Deepika. Hi everyone, I'm Kiran Sirupa. In the next few minutes, I will walk through a demo of service activation. I will be demonstrating this use case where we add pre and post checks to services using the workflow. We will be deploying a layer 2 VPN between two routers, a Juniper MX 204 and a Cisco router running iOS XR. Prior to invoking the service, we will use the workflow to run pre-checks. We will check whether the device is online and we will run many other sanity checks. Then we will see that all the commands will be auto-generated to provision the layer 2 VPN service between the multi-vendor devices. The operator can preview the commands and approve the overall service. After that, the workflow will run post checks to make sure all the commands are deployed to the devices. It will then run activation tests and sets up the service quality monitoring. Typically, configuring an L2 VPN requires complex commands including setting up the virtual circuit ID, policy map, QoS rate limiting policies, MTU, etc. Here, we want to set MTU as 1522 bytes, use virtual circuit ID 55, and then rate limit to 14 megabits per second on both VPN endpoints. These are my two routers. This is my Juniper MX, and as you can see, it doesn't have any configuration. Here is the peer router without any configuration. Now let's invoke a service from the Atom GUI. This is the Atom user interface. To create a L2 VPN service, we simply click on this plus button and it is going to ask us for a bunch of parameters to create the VPN service. To save time, you can have the operator import a template. Let me just show you one. So I'm going to use this template. Let me just show you how it looks like. A template is a simple text file with attribute value pairs that will come with preloaded parameters. So I'm going to load this template and you can see that now we are requesting a layer 2 VPN service with the MTU and the bandwidth, and we are also going to provision this on the 4.99, which is the Juniper MX device using the XC interface with S tag and C tag. Similarly, the Spear device, we are using the bundle Ethernet interface. And once we submit the request, it will actually trigger a workflow. This is the Atom workflow that runs the pre-checks and post-checks. Let's dig a little bit deeper. As you can see, it takes user input, everything that we gave for the layer 2 VPN service. It gets the customer details, and since it's point to point, it's going to get the two peer management IP addresses, and it's going to run the pre-checks on each device. Once the pre-checks are successful, then it will generate the payload to push commands to the device. It will then wait for the operator's approval, and if the operator approves it, then it continues to push the commands to the devices, and then it will run post checks. And if the post checks are successful, that's when it can activate service activation testing as well as service quality monitoring testing. So let's look at the pre-checks. Now pre-checks, as you see here, have a bunch of commands that you typically issue to make sure the device is ready to push commands to the device. For example, as you can see here, the workflow is going to test the connectivity to the peer by issuing a ping command. Then it will cross-check that the VCID, the 555 that we selected, is not yet used so far. And this customer also wanted us to capture the last 500 lines of the log command. So that part is done before provisioning the service. So like that, you can run a bunch of pre-checks, and only when it is successful, the workflow will continue. It's also very easy to add your own checks to this workflow. Atom already has a bunch of libraries that you can reuse. For example, we can just simply drag and drop one of the existing libraries, and you will see that it automatically comes with a code. So you just have to customize it to your environment, and then you can simply connect it to this workflow. So like that, you can create your own custom workflows. After the pre-checks are complete, Atom will generate the payload. As you see in this workflow, depending on the type of the vendor, Atom will generate the corresponding configuration commands. In this particular case, it sets up the policy map and the MTU values, and it will assign the policy map to the interface, and it will create the overall layer 2 VPN commands. After this, it will preview the commands to the operator. The operator can then approve it. So now we understood how the overall workflow looks like in Atom. Now let's see it in action. So it has triggered this workflow. As you can see, the workflow is going through the pre-checks. We can also see the task status over here. It can show you that it has invoked all these commands. For example, these are some of the things you would have to do manually to ping the peer router, to cross-check the VCID. For example, there was no such VCID used. Like that, it can run all the pre-checks. You get to see the output of the pre-checks, and then it will move on to the next step. Now the workflow is waiting for operator's approval. The operator can preview the commands that are going to be generated. We can see that on the iOS XR device, Atom is going to push all this configuration, whereas on the Juniper MX device, it's going to auto-generate and push this configuration. Now the operator is happy with the configuration. He can go ahead and approve the workflow. We first claim the operation, and then we execute the approval. Once we submit the approval, we will see that configuration now exists on the device. Similarly, on the Juniper MX, we can see the configuration. Now the service is provisioned and it's complete. As you can see, the service is ready. So in summary, we have shown how a complex service like layer 2 VPN can be provisioned across a multi-vendor network by introducing pre-checks and as well as post-checks that are extremely complicated, which will take probably days to execute, can now be completed within minutes using Atom's service orchestration and workflow automation features. And what's more, after a service is provisioned, you could actually enable the service activation testing as well as service quality monitoring playbooks. Over to you, Natasha.